Hey fam, welcome back to the channel. Um, this video is going to be on a little more serious note. The other day when I was working, I drove past a house that reminded me of something horrific that happened there. It happened to be a quadruple homicide in my very small town. Shook the hell out of the town. It really did, because those things just don't happen here. Not like that. And just, just kind of want to go over all this. I mean, it was a terrible thing that happened here, and it'll also caution you for the potential dangers of online romance. So, anyway, let's check this out. This is about the Farmville murders.
Yes, I don't know who I need to talk to, or
What's up?
my daughter is with a family in Farmville, Virginia, and she's been basically missing for the past 2.5 days. I can't get a hold of her. Her cell phone's turned off. What's worse is the girl that she was staying with. Nobody knows where she is. Her cell phone is turned off. His daughter's boyfriend is staying there, and I've talked to him several times today, and I've gotten different stories from him. But my husband went down. He was supposed to pick up my daughter yesterday. And he went down there. He arrived at about 11 o'clock in the morning. He sat there for 8 hours outside the house. Nobody showed up. Nobody answered the door. I mean, we're about 4 hours away here, and I don't know what else to do.
This was the desperate call of a mother who hadn't heard from her daughter in days. There had been no texts, no calls, just silence. Something felt wrong, and with every passing second, that gut-wrenching fear grew stronger. She had tried everything. She had tried calling, texting, and reaching out to friends, but nothing worked. The family her daughter was staying with had also gone completely off the radar. Every number she dialed went straight to voicemail. It was as if they had all just disappeared, except for one. One phone was still on. One person was still reachable.
It's in my final minutes of being alive, and to anybody that finds this, I want you to tell my parents I love them deeply, and I'm very sorry for doing this. To my brother, Sinister, aka Eric, and Emily, I love you guys deeply. I'm sorry for going this route. I know I said I'd turn myself in.
No one knew it at the time, but the truth was already rotting inside that house. The air was thick with the stench of death. Bodies sprawled across the rooms.
That is the actual house, and I know exactly where that house is. I see it often. But can you believe what you just heard? This guy stayed in the house for days with decomposing corpses. What has to happen for you to make your mind go that stupid? Go that crazy?
Lifeless. But the world outside hadn't caught on yet. The missing persons, the unanswered calls. It was only the beginning. The man on the other end of that one working phone, Richard Allen Samuel McCroskey III, a 20-year-old who lived a quiet life in Castro Valley, California. By day, a graphic designer. At night, he transforms into an amateur horrorcore rapper, obsessed with violent lyrics and dark fantasies.
I think in some of my music reaction videos, I've probably told you that I like all music except screamo emo and horrorcore rap because of the murderous, violent lyrics. Yeah, no, I'm not about that life. And I really don't think people should be listening to that, because if that's something you hear all the time, I almost feel like it reprograms you in a way. I mean, am I tripping? What do y'all think?
And now he was at the end of something far more terrifying than any song he had ever written. So, after that desperate call, the search for answers had only just begun. No one knew what had happened inside that house yet. The fear, the uncertainty, it was only growing. But the man at the center of it all, he had been carrying darkness long before that night. Richard McCroskey's story didn't begin with violence, but with loneliness. Born on December 26, 1988, in California, he grew up feeling like an outsider from the start. He was quiet, overweight, and awkward, an easy target for bullies. The teasing never stopped. His red hair, his shy nature, the way he carried himself, everything about him made him stand out in the worst ways. But
I feel bad that he was bullied as a child. I really do. And kids can be so cruel to other kids. But it should never justify murder. It should never turn you into the type of person where you will brutally murder 4 people.
he never fought back, never lashed out. He kept it all inside, letting it fester, letting it grow.
Maybe if he had fought back, it wouldn't have festered. It wouldn't have grown. Because the best way to stand up to a bully is to stand up to a bully.
Home wasn't much better. In the summer of 2009, his parents' marriage fell apart. His father told his mother to leave, and she was gone. Just like that, another piece of stability was ripped away. For someone already drowning in isolation, it was a final push deeper into the dark. And in that darkness, he found an escape. Not in friends, not in family, but in something far more dangerous: horrorcore. A niche underground music scene built around violence, murder, and psychological horror. To some, it was just entertainment, but to Richard, it was home. He didn't just listen, he lived it. He became something else. No longer Richard McCroskey, the quiet kid. Now, he was Psycho Sam. His MySpace page became his stage. His lyrics dripped with blood, mutilation, and revenge. His songs were graphic, filled with detailed descriptions of stabbing, killing, and watching people take their last breath. Online, he wasn't a joke. He wasn't the weird, quiet kid who got picked on. For the first time in his life, people listened. They weren't laughing. They weren't mocking him. They liked it. They wanted.
I don't know about y'all, but I think if my kid were into this and had pictures and stuff like that all over their wall, I think me and that kid would be having a big fight. Yeah, I'd be fighting.
Wanted more. And that validation, it fed him, made the darkness inside him stronger. But it didn't stop at music. A 16-year-old girl who shared his love for horrorcore. Someone who didn't see him as an outsider, at least not yet. And in Richard's mind, Emma wasn't just a friend. She was his. What started as an online connection was about to become something far more dangerous. Because Richard's fantasies were no longer just lyrics in a song. They were about to become real. Days after the murders, a recording surfaced, a chilling confession. The voice was calm, flat, almost lifeless. No panic, no remorse. Just a quiet, matter-of-fact statement about the smell. The stench of death had become unbearable. The bodies, left to rot inside the house, were beginning to decay, and he couldn't ignore it anymore.
Alright, so I'm making this video because, or if anybody finds this, I really don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm breathtaking at what I've done, and I apologize. I know I'm gonna pay for my consequences. You know, I wish that I could have not done this, but I just lost my mind. I snapped, and I did what I did, and I gotta pay for it now. My consequences. I'm like all shaky and stuff, but like, to anybody that finds this, tell my parents that like I love them, and I'm very sorry for doing this, and there's nothing really else to say. To everybody that is probably gonna hate me for this, I'm sorry, and I had to do it. My mind just snapped. I couldn't control it anymore. That's it. You to the big world. Everybody in the world. I can't stand this place.
The neighbors had noticed too. That foul odor is creeping through the air, seeping into the street. At first, they dismissed it, maybe a dead animal somewhere nearby. But as the days passed, it became clear that this wasn't something small. This was something worse. Inside that house, Richard had been living among the dead for days, walking past the bodies, sitting near them, breathing in the horror of what he had done. He didn't run, not immediately. He stayed. But when he did finally leave, he didn't just slip away unnoticed. He left behind something straight out of a nightmare. When officers arrived, they stepped into something they would never forget. Blood on the walls, on the floors, violence in every corner. This wasn't just murder. This was butchery.
Yeah, I'm sure they will never forget it because, like I said, this sort of butchery, as they put it, just doesn't happen here. I mean, it really shook the hell out of this town.
And Richard, he was already gone, but not for long. Richard was obsessed with true crime and serial killers. He idolized David Berkowitz, better known as the Son of Sam. His room was filled with horrorcore posters, violent artwork, and eerie tributes to murderers of the past. He even had multiple alter egos online: Lil Demon Dog, Psycho Sam, each one darker than the last. And then there were the cemeteries. Richard spent hours wandering through graveyards. He posed for pictures with axes, vandalized tombstones, and posted videos online boasting about his so-called adventures. In his mind, he was no longer just a fan of horror. He was becoming part of it.
See what I mean? It's like he was programming his mind to be like that through this genre of music. Now, granted, there are a lot of people who enjoy that music and they don't do things like this. But I still maintain when you're feeding such negative and murderous and violence into your ears and your eyes all the time, it's going to have an effect on you.
We defiled the grave, and then lightning struck seconds ago. I think we were being warned. And now it's starting to rain. It's because we fucked up the grave. It's not my fault. And now it's starting to rain really hard. So peace.
Emma Niederbrock and Richard met through the horrorcore community, bonding over their shared obsession. Emma Niederbrock was also a horrorcore fan, another misfit drawn to the same violent music and dark fantasies. She called herself Ragdoll online.
Alright, so you wanted a video, and you made me videos, and he said please, so I'll make you this video, even though I'm not gonna like do anything, because my room's kind of dirty, and yeah, I don't want to show you my dirty room. But this video is for Emma, because you just told me to say your name. So I don't know. I'll make you another video once clean, I promise.
It started with messages, then video calls. Soon, they were talking constantly, feeding off each other's dark interests. But Richard was different around her, shy, nervous. In one of his videos, his voice trembled. He wanted to impress her. He wanted to be seen as something more than just another outcast. So he did what he thought would make him worthy of her attention. He took the fantasies and made them real. What started as an online friendship quickly spiraled into something far worse.
Alright, this video is for you, Emma. The ragdoll, amazing ragdoll. And I really don't know what to do for you on video. So I guess I'll show you my room a little bit, if that's what you want to see. First off, we got my door. And then we got my addiction for energy drinks. And then we got my small underground CD collection going on right here. And then we got my wall of awesomeness, that I call it. Lots of posters and flyers and a Hatchet Man charm and random stuff. A hatchet. Oh no, the battery's dying.
Something that would leave 4 people dead and an entire town in shock. And Richard McCroskey, he wasn't done yet. So, with Richard spiraling deeper into his dark world, everything was leading to one fateful meeting. And at the center of it all was Emma Niederbrock, the girl who, in his mind, was already his. Emma was born on October 15, 1992, and grew up in Farmville, Virginia. Her father, Mark Niederbrock, was a pastor at Walker's Presbyterian Church. Her mother, Deborah Kelly, was a professor of sociology and criminal justice at Longwood University. From the outside, it was an average life, a stable home, a quiet town. But inside, things were shifting. When her parents divorced in early 2009, Emma changed. The sweet, well-mannered girl they once knew was slipping away. She dyed her hair pink, started wearing gothic clothes, and became obsessed with horrorcore music. What they assumed was just a teenage phase was something far deeper, something unsettling. Emma wasn't just listening to the music, she was living it. The satanic imagery, the obsession with death, the violent themes, it became her identity. By that summer, Richard wasn't just some guy online. He was her connection to this world. They had spent months talking, flirty messages, inside jokes, long conversations about the music they both loved.
All right, so this young man has completely fallen off his rocker for this teenage girl. And she fed it. She fed it to a degree. Don't misunderstand. I am not blaming the victims for what happened to them. It's just, this is just a cautionary tale. It's a cautionary tale. To be very careful what you say to people online.
Richard saw this as more than just an online friendship. To him, she was his girlfriend. But how did Emma really feel? That was the question. And no one would ever know the full truth. Emma's best friend, Melanie Wells, was just as drawn to the horrorcore scene. At 18 years old, she had built her own persona online, Miss Free Abortions. She posted eerie cemetery photos, listed her interests in bloodlust, alcohol, and open graves, and fully embraced the dark aesthetic. The two girls were inseparable, bonding over their rebellious style and their love for the underground music scene. That September, they came across a horrorcore event called Strictly for the Wicked. It was an all-day festival in Southgate, Michigan. The second they heard about it, they knew they had to go. Richard was also happy to attend the festival and would also meet Emma. After months of talking, this was going to be their first time meeting in person. Emma's parents were understandably concerned. Their teenage daughter meeting up with a 20-year-old man she had only known through a screen. It was enough to make them hesitate. But in the end, despite their worries and despite the strain of their own recent divorce, Mark and Deborah agreed to take them. So
I wouldn't have allowed that. I would not have allowed a 20-year-old man to come stay in my home and romance my 16-year-old daughter. Granted, when he's 28 and she's 24, it's not a big deal. But right now, it is. And the mother was a sociology professor and for criminal justice and everything. You know, her knowledge and her background just had major red flags just going off in her brain. Um, but it seems in this instance, rather than following that gut instinct and what she knows through her, profession, that she chose to just give in to her daughter instead. And it's not your job to be their friend. That happens when they're grown. While they're kids, it's your job to be their parent. And sometimes you're not going to make them happy. But it is what it is, and it's in their best interest. I mean, I get where she was coming from. I do, but there were so many things through this that just could have made every bit of this preventable.
So, the plan was set. Mark and Deborah would drive Emma, Melanie, and Richard from Virginia to Michigan for the festival. While the kids were at the event, they would spend the day elsewhere. It was a compromise, a way to give Emma some freedom while still keeping a close eye on things. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was just how far Richard's obsession had already gone. By September 6th, Richard was on his way. He boarded a plane from California to Virginia. The long-awaited moment was finally happening, and Emma, she was excited, maybe even more than Richard himself. On September 7th, she left him a message online. She left him a short, affectionate note. "By the next time you check this, you'll be at my house. I love you so, so much. I will love you forever and always." She had no idea what was coming.
See, teenagers do this. I mean, young people, they're so quick to throw that word around, and they all do. They all do. I get that. But we're in a different time now. We're in a very dangerous time. And again, you've got to be careful what you say to people online, especially from a romantic nature, because they may be feeling something very much more than you. And when you don't respond the way that they want you to, it could be dangerous.
And neither did her family. So, as the festival date got closer, Richard made his way to Farmville, Virginia. That was the only way Emma's parents agreed to let her go, to have him stay at their house before and after the event. Whether he arrived on September 7th or 8th isn't clear, but he was there days before the concert. It was a strange decision, really, letting a 20-year-old man from across the country stay in their home, someone their daughter had only known through the internet, someone whose entire identity revolved around violent music and dark imagery. But maybe they thought they were keeping things under control. Maybe they believed this was just a teenage phase, something harmless that would pass. But Emma's excitement didn't last long. When she finally saw Richard in person, the reality wasn't what she had imagined. His MySpace photos had given her a different picture. Online, he had seemed intense, mysterious, and cool. In person, shorter than expected, younger looking, awkward. His oversized black hoodie, baggy cargo pants, greasy red hair. Everything about him suddenly felt off. And just like that, whatever attraction she thought she had was gone. Emma and Melanie Wells, who had also arrived to join them for the festival, lost interest fast. They were annoyed by Richard, distant. They didn't try to hide it either. Richard, who had spent months thinking of this trip as a dream come true, now felt like an outsider. But he didn't give up hope. He believed the festival, strictly for the wicked, would bring Emma back to him. The music, the horrorcore vibe, the energy of the crowd. Maybe it would remind her of what they had online. Maybe she'd remember why she had been so eager to meet him in the first place. But that hope crumbled fast, because at the event, Emma ignored him. She laughed, danced, and had the time of her life, but not with him. She was flirty, talking to other guys, paying him no attention. Richard watched it all. His frustration boiled deep inside him. The jealousy, the rejection, the months of waiting for this. He had left his home, traveled across the country, believed they had something real, and now she didn't even care? By the time the festival ended at 11 p.m. on September 12th, Richard was silent, brooding. They all got in the car for the long 600-mile drive back to Farmville. No one in that car knew what was coming next. After reaching home at 2:43 a.m. on September 14th, Melanie posted on MySpace. She wrote about the festival, saying how amazing it was and how she'd be back in West Virginia soon. That was the last time anyone saw her online. Hours later, while the house was quiet, Richard snapped. Sometime around 3 a.m., Richard McCroskey stood in the dark, gripping the maul in his hands. It was heavy, solid, a tool meant for splitting wood, not for what he was about to do. Melanie Wells was the first to die. He stepped into the den where Melanie Wells was sleeping on the couch. She had no idea what was coming. She was curled up, deep in sleep, completely vulnerable. Richard raised them all high above his head and swung. The first blow smashed into her skull. A sickening crack filled the room. Her body jerked from the impact, but she never woke up. He hit her again and again. Bone shattered. Her face collapsed under the weight of the repeated blows. Blood splattering across the couch, the floor, and the walls. By the time he stopped, her head was unrecognizable. A mess of blood, skull fragments, and matted hair. Her body slumped lifelessly into the growing pool of blood. But Richard wasn't finished. Deborah Kelly also had no chance to scream. He crept upstairs next, into Deborah Kelly's room. She was asleep, just like Melanie. The maul was still dripping. Richard raised it high above his head and brought it down with full force. The first blow landed on her forehead, splitting the skin open instantly. Blood poured down her face as her body convulsed, her last moments filled with pain and confusion. Richard didn't stop. He swung again. The impact crushed her skull. A deep, horrific indentation caved into her head. She never screamed, never had the chance. With every strike, the bedroom walls became more painted with red. Her bed, once a place of comfort, was now a crime scene. The sheets were soaked. The pillow absorbed the blood like a sponge. The body that once held a mother, a professor, a woman with a life was now just another lifeless corpse in the house. And then came Emma Niederbrock, the one he wanted most. Emma was next. His Emma. The one who had brought him here. The one who had led him on. The one who had laughed at him. She was asleep in her downstairs bedroom. Richard opened the door and stood over her for a moment. His breathing was ragged. His hands are shaking. There was a moment, just a split second, where he hesitated. No. He raised the maul and swung it down. The first hit landed on the side of her face. Bone shattered instantly. Her cheekbone, jaw, everything collapsed. Her body twitched. Her breath gurgled, but she was still alive. Richard didn't stop. He raised the maul again and slammed it into her skull. This time, it was over. Blood pooled beneath her head. Her body lay motionless, the twisted remains of what once was a 16-year-old girl. The room smelled of iron and death. Richard stared at her. For months, she had been the center of his world, and now she was just another body in the house. 3 days later, Mark Niederbrock came looking for his daughter. He stepped through the front door, completely unaware that she was already dead. Richard was waiting. Before Mark could react, before he could even understand what was happening, Richard attacked.
So the dad, goes over to check on everybody because even though the parents were divorced, they were still good friends. It was actually an amicable divorce, from what I understand. And he was ambushed. He was ambushed by this guy. Victim number 4.
The first hit knocked him to the floor. He tried to get up, tried to fight back, but Richard was relentless. He swung again and again. The wooden floorboards became drenched with blood. Mark's face caved in. His skull fractured, his teeth shattered, his jaw barely held together. By the time Richard stopped, Mark was gone. Another body, another lifeless, broken corpse in a house filled with death. For the next few days, Richard stayed in that house. The bodies rotted around him. The air grew thick with decay. He ate. He slept. He walked past the pools of dried blood like they weren't even there. And when the stench became unbearable, he finally decided to leave. But by then, it was too late. The walls were closing in, and his days of freedom were numbered. So, after Melanie's last online post, the silence that followed was impossible to ignore. Days passed, and no one heard from her. No calls, no messages, nothing. Her family was getting worried. It wasn't like her to just disappear. Then came September 16th, the day she was supposed to return home. Her father, Thomas Wells, drove to Emma's house in Farmville. He knocked, called, and waited. No answer. He sat in his car outside the house for 7 hours, hoping someone would come out, hoping he would see his daughter. But the house stayed silent. Something was wrong. He could feel it. When he finally left, that feeling didn't go away. Meanwhile, Melanie's mother called everyone, friends, family, anyone who might have seen her daughter. But every call went straight to voicemail. Every message went unanswered. She wasn't going to sit back and wait. Determined to find some kind of lead, she reached out to a festival organizer, Andre Schrim, better known in the horror community as Sicktanic. Back in 2009, horrorcore fans and artists were tight-knit. Everyone knew each other, and if anyone had seen Melanie, it would be someone from that scene. Andre confirmed it. He had seen Melanie at the festival. She was there with Emma and Richard, and when the concert ended, they left together, with Emma's parents. That only made things worse. Melanie's mother tried calling Emma's house again. This time, someone answered. It was Richard. His words were vague, his tone off. He didn't give straight answers about where Melanie was. It didn't sound right. Something was off, and her mother knew it. She wasn't just worried anymore. She was sure something was terribly wrong. By the morning of September 17th, her concern had boiled over. There were no more options left. She called Farmville police and asked them to check on the house. They went. They knocked. Richard answered the door. He told the officers that Emma and Melanie were out at the movies with Deborah. He called himself Emma's boyfriend. He spoke with confidence and calmness. There was nothing frantic about him. No nervous energy. And it worked. The officers didn't push further. They didn't ask to look inside. They had no...
This was 2 days after he killed them. They've been in that house dead for 2 days. They couldn't smell anything. Is this some Barney Fife shit?
reason to suspect that just beyond that door, inside that house, 4 bodies were already rotting. So they left. And that could have been the end of it. But Melanie's mother didn't give up. She called Emma's father, Mark. She needed answers. He promised to check on Melanie and get back to her. But 5 p.m. on September 17th would be the last time anyone heard from him. And when that call never came, when Mark's silence stretched on for hours, the dread settled in. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just kids avoiding their parents. Something had happened. By the morning of September 18th, there was only one thing left to do. She called the police again, and this time she convinced them to go back. This time, there would be no walking away. So, after days of silence, the police returned to Emma's house. It was 3:20 p.m. when they arrived. This time, there was no knocking, no waiting for someone to answer the door. They pushed it open, and it was unlocked. But Richard, he was gone. The house was silent, still. But something felt wrong immediately, and then it hit them. That smell, the thick, nauseating stench of death, poured from inside the house. It clung to the air, filled their lungs, and made their stomachs turn. It was everywhere. There was no mistaking it now. The officers had been there just the day before, standing at this same door. How had they missed it? This time, there was no taking anyone's word for it. They stepped inside, and what they found was worse than anything they had imagined. The first thing they saw was Emma's bedroom. The door was open. Inside, on the floor, in a pool of blood, 3 lifeless bodies. The officers froze. This wasn't just a crime scene. This was something out of a nightmare. The bodies had been there for days. The blood had dried, turning dark against the floor. The air reeked of decay. They called for backup. With that discovery, a search warrant was quickly obtained. They needed to see the rest of the house, and as they moved through the rooms, they found one more body. Upstairs, Deborah Kelly. Now there was no doubt. The bodies in the house were confirmed. Mark Niederbrock, Emma Niederbrock, Melanie Wells, and Deborah Kelly, all brutally murdered. And it wasn't just the killings. It was the way they were done, the sheer violence, the force used. The officers didn't share the worst details with the public, but they confirmed one thing: blunt force trauma, severe, repeated, no chance of survival. The brutality of it all stayed with them. Even the most seasoned officers were haunted by what they saw inside that house. But there was something else. One person was missing: Richard McCroskey.
I think I would be haunted by that too if I had had to see it.
The officers started piecing it all together. They checked social media, looked at Emma's and Melanie's accounts. The connections became clear. And then one of them remembered. They had spoken to him the day before, during the first welfare check. They had talked to the killer, face to face, and they let him go. That realization hit hard. There was no time to waste now. A manhunt for Richard McCloskey was launched. So, as the police began their manhunt, they didn't know one thing yet. Richard had already slipped through their fingers. Just 12 hours before they discovered the bodies, they had another strange encounter with him. It was around 4 a.m. on September 18th. A deputy had been called out to Poorhouse Road, a desolate stretch of highway in Prince Edward County, Virginia. A car was stuck in a ditch, and standing beside it, Richard McCroskey. The deputy asked him about the vehicle. Richard didn't hesitate. Calmly, casually, he said it belonged to his girlfriend's dad. What the officer didn't know was that Mark Niederbrock was already dead. By that point, Richard had stolen the car. He had wrecked it, probably in a panic, trying to leave town before anyone figured out what happened. But the deputy, he had no idea who he was really talking to. Richard wasn't nervous. He wasn't acting suspicious. So the officer did what anyone would do in a routine traffic stop. He wrote a ticket for driving without a license. He told Richard the car would have to be impounded, and that was it. The officer let him go. Richard walked away without handcuffs, without suspicion. At that moment, the bodies were still inside Emma's house. The police hadn't found them yet. Richard had murdered 4 people, and now he was free to keep running. Not long after, a truck driver named Elton Napier came across him at the side of the road. Napier, 52 years old, was used to picking up hitchhikers. He pulled over and offered Richard a ride. The second Richard got in, Napier noticed the smell, something foul.
How come the cop who gave him the ticket didn't notice that smell? Because it's my understanding if you're a police officer, you recognize that smell. It's a very distinct smell.
Something rotten. It filled the air, so thick and strong that Napier had to roll down the windows. He tried to ignore it, but twice he gagged. He glanced over at the quiet, pale-looking kid in his passenger seat. Richard had red marks all over his neck, like love bites. Napier made a joke about it. Richard just grinned. He didn't tell Napier that the girl he claimed to be his girlfriend, Emma Niederbrock, was already dead, that he had beaten her to death in her own bedroom, that she was still inside that house, rotting. The conversation didn't last long. Napier dropped him off at a gas station. That was the last time he saw him, until he turned on his TV days later and saw Richard's arrest. But while Richard was on the move, he made a phone call, one final, chilling call. He confessed. He admitted to the murders.
Which is gonna be over there, if you can see that. I'm not gonna tell you what I'm gonna do, because I'm sure you guys know what I'm gonna do. I'm really sorry, but it came to this. But I'm gonna get going and do what I gotta do. I'm gonna pay my consequences. So my last words before I go: to the world.
By then, the walls were closing in. The police were closing in, and his time was running out. After days of running, Richard McCroskey was finally caught. On September 19th, authorities tracked him down at the Richmond International Airport, sleeping in the baggage claim area. He had nowhere left to go. The moment officers moved in, he didn't resist. No fight, no struggle, just silence. He was charged with robbery, grand theft, and 6 counts of first-degree murder. The reality of what he had done had finally caught up to him. But even in custody, Richard refused to talk. Investigators pressed him for answers, but he just sat there, stone-faced, uncooperative. Whatever thoughts were running through his mind, he kept them to himself. A judge appointed Carrie Bowen, a well-known capital murder defender, to represent him. The case was too big for just any lawyer. This was one of the most gruesome crimes Virginia had seen in years. But even Bowen, the lawyer assigned to defend him, hadn't spoken to Richard yet. The court set a preliminary hearing for January 11th. The prosecution needed time. They had mountains of evidence to go through: computers, phones, and bags upon bags of material seized from Richard's home. 6 counts of capital murder. The weight of those words hung in the air. If convicted, Richard faced the death penalty. But when the time came, he didn't fight it. On September 20th, 2010, Richard pleaded guilty to all 4 murders. No trial, no drawn-out courtroom battle, just a quiet admission of guilt. The judge spared him the death penalty, but the alternative wasn't much better: life in prison. For the families of the victims, it was closure, but no relief. No sentence could bring back Emma, Melanie, Mark, or Deborah. The case that had started with a horrifying discovery in a quiet Virginia town had now come to its final chapter. And Richard McCroskey, the horrorcore rapper,
This is just a crazy story. It's a crazy story all the way around. Like I said, it really shook our town up. It really shook our town up. And to my knowledge, nothing to this degree has happened since. I happen to know the people who live across the street from that house. And that house stayed empty for a very, very long time. And then it was bought, and they said the guy didn't stay there real long. He kept saying strange things were happening in the house. And with that kind of dark energy, I don't doubt it. There was a very violent takedown of 4 people inside that house. Surely some dark energy was left behind. But But the house just, keeps going back and forth from empty to people who don't want to stay very long. So I don't know. The house is, like I said, the house is still there. I drove by it again just the other day. And when you go by it, you cannot help but think about this, which is what brought me to share this story with you guys. Quadruple murder in my little small town. Anyway, this was 16 years ago, so 17 years ago almost. But still. Anyway, I know that was long. I also know it was a little bit dark, and it's a little not what we do around here. But like I said, I wanted to share that with you. And let me know what you guys think about this. I mean, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and God bless.